Hey everyone, got a treat in store for you. Comrade Fudge. I'll just jump into it. I'm going to do a thread. I'm going to do a thing. It's about time we had one of these threads. It's deep thinking kind of threads, that 200 IQ level thread that can only be comprehended by pounding glasses of bourbon. Topic: mimetic vectors. Dumbasses at the Daily Beast and Biden. First, an archive of this Daily Beast article about Joe Biden's digital campaign allegedly knowing what it's doing. I use the word allegedly in the very literal sense, as I disagree fundamentally. Secondly, my thread from November 8th, 2017, talking about mimetic vectors a little over a year after Trump's electoral victory in 2016. In that thread, I asserted that Trump's victory came through the use of viral memes and better usage of mimetic vectors with a mixture of bottom-up vectors and mid-level top-down vectors. A fuck ton of grassroots support of random people on the internet and a few big names. Clinton, meanwhile, used top-down vectors at the highest level almost exclusively, relying on massive media support alone to spread ideas en masse. This is where it gets funny. Democrats honestly believe that the level of Trump support from bottom-up mimetic vectors was impossible, that it was unreal. They honestly believe that it was a bunch of Russian bots because that's the only explanation they can accept. They put such a value to their own voice and their own ideas that they cannot possibly conceive of thousands of independent voices drowning them out. So obviously, these thousands of voices can't be real. That's their logic. And now the Daily Beast displays how the Biden campaign is making the exact same mistake. First, an archived Quartz article from last year describing the funniest fucking phenomena. Quote, TikTok banned political ads, but pro-Trump content is thriving and misleading teens. From the article, earlier this month, TikTok announced that it would not accept political advertising, but political messaging is doing quite well on the platform and reaching millions of young people who are the app's primary user base and who are emerging voters. End quote. So, because they couldn't use advertising to generate top-down vectors artificially, Trump supporters, who are almost all bottom-up vectors, are dominating TikTok. Let's see what Biden's campaign thinks about TikTok. Quote, for us to try and force it by having Biden go on TikTok and hit the whoa or whatever, that just doesn't compute with who the guy is. End quote. Well, shit. If that just don't beat all, you mean Biden can't compete with a bunch of random kids on TikTok? No shit. I mean, the leading rhetorical question from the article is fucking hilarious. Quote, the currency of electoral politics is engagement, but what if engaging certain audiences is not always a good thing? End quote. This is the excuse they're making. The Daily Beast is trying to build it. Well, you see, Biden just doesn't jive with these young turkeys, you see. So he has to be more selective, they say, as the Biden campaign is effectively retreating from TikTok due to being absolutely fucking face-rolled on the platform by bottom-up mimetic vectors. Quote, that's the question the Biden campaign is trying to answer as it navigates a novel political landscape in which the act of campaigning has been reduced to a series of decisions about which platforms to engage from the candidate's home. End quote. That is also what I've been saying about the Kung Flu for a while now. Biden's campaign is going full digital because they have to. And at first, it was a blessing for them because Biden in person is a goddamn nightmare for his campaign managers. From the article, quote, often the choices they've made have proved correct, end quote. That's debatable. Quote, but occasionally they have not, as evidenced by the storm kicked up Friday when appearing on Charlemagne the God's The Breakfast Club. i.e., they fucked up royal. See, the attempts to appear on these internet talk shows is an attempt to get mid-level, top-down mimetic vectors, an avenue that Hillary Clinton effectively lacked altogether. She did not have anyone like Thomas Wichter or Scott Adams spreading mimetic ideas for her campaign. But now, there hasn't been a single instance of Biden working with a mid-level, top-down mimetic vector to a result in his favor. It just hasn't happened. See, what they've realized now, and what this Daily Beast article is trying to set up for them, is for Biden to fully retreat from social media. Quote from the article, "For Biden, can less truly actually be more?" This right here. Quote, "The day prior to Charlemagne interview, Biden's digital director didn't directly say the campaign is deliberately limiting exposure, but he did say that the campaign wasn't just cognizant of the dangers of overengagement, but actively strategizing against it. As documented by Peter Hamby in Vanity Fair, Biden's appearances have been selected with the awareness that contrived settings are likely counterproductive, convincing the very audiences they're trying to reach that he was there merely to shill for their votes." Okay, so you get that. All right. Biden's mere presence is outright toxic. The man hit a string of gaffes and sheer fucking nonsense before the Kung flu struck, forcing him into his basement. They tried to softball him out on the internet, and now he's self-destructing wherever he goes. Quote, "For most candidates, more exposure is a good thing. But then there's Biden," said Rebecca Katz, a progressive strategist who has been critical of Biden. "It's important to meet voters where they are, but only if you're not offending them when you do it." No shit. Quote, "During the primary, he lagged in building up a small dollar donor network despite benefiting from the Obama-Biden email list. His campaign's engagement on social media platforms was pedestrian, and he kept largely within his media comfort zone. He has no bottom-up vectors. Biden does not generate positive, supportive content. His followers can only attack because they aren't able to defend Biden. He has reached a point of being indefensible for bottom-up vectors, which is why all of the excuses come from top-down mimetic vectors." Quote, "Biden made a bet that nostalgia for the Obama years and old school campaigning would prove more determinative. And, well, he was right." End quote. No, it would not prove more effective. Biden can't beat Trump's rallies. When the old school campaigning couldn't happen, look what happened. Quote, whatever plans the campaign had to adjust its approach online came to a halt with the spread of the coronavirus. Early on, it appeared that being confined to his basement merely accentuated Biden's deficits." Appear to? They tried to edit out the gaffes. There were too many. Quote, "The portrait of a candidate stuck in the dial-up generation was hardened by the daily tech problems and the verbal stumbles that defined his live streaming." End quote. Yes, because the mistakes were constant. The videos and live streams were supposed to be a consistent thing. Daily Beast then goes into full-on pander mode. Quote, "Biden's standing against Trump is both remarkably persistent and historically good for a challenger facing an incumbent." End quote. Really? Really? Because Biden just fucked up royal. What, Friday was the Charlemagne interview? Quote, "His grassroots fundraising has notably improved, having scored the single-day and single-hour record for donations through the online giving site Act Blue, according to Act Blue." End quote. Act Blue attempting to do everything it can to save face. Hilarious. Quote, Biden is adopting a different tack. One of the principles of his online outreach is that the candidate himself can't always be the primary messenger, end quote. And there we fucking go. They're accepting that they can't use Biden to campaign for his own damn self. Quote, in order to tap into that paradigm, the campaign has tried to create organic content that Biden's supportive voters or trusted voices can help push through the various channels. End quote. And they're failing to, miserably. The campaign is trying to go purely top-down vectors. You cannot fake bottom-up vectors. You cannot physically create them. You can't just make a carpe diem or a soul memes. The Warren meme team was a prime example of the Dems failing to grasp this very fucking concept. Quote, our base, the people who engage with our content, the formats that they like, most are voxy. Also like Upworthy and Now This, he said. What in the actual fuck are Upworthy and Now This? They couldn't make a dent in TikTok, so they're fleeing to... What the fuck are those? Quote, while Team Biden has found a groove in its video production operations, there remains glaring problems still to solve in its overall approach. The plurality of their viewers on Facebook are women 65 and older. On Facebook, their largest growth in audience is older people, end quote. I.e., they're right now only reaching people through Facebook who won't generate fresh content to spread. They're failing to create any top-down vectors. Nowhere in this article does it talk about people outside of the Biden campaign making content of their own volition. This is where it gets even more hilarious as they try to compare Bernie and Buttigieg's campaigns to Biden's. Quote, Senator Bernie Sanders took pride in directly engaging audiences that weren't always capital D Democratic. Former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, built an entire campaign persona around the idea that he was willing to go everywhere and anywhere. Then again, neither of them won. Biden did. Biden did not win. Biden simply existed at the top box of a cavalcade of really fucking bad choices. Bernie isn't palatable to anyone with 2 non-weed-induced brain cells, and Buttigieg only functions in rural states like Iowa. Quote, still, Flaherty acknowledges that there is work to be done in generating interest among progressives and younger voters. That is, in his words, not enough for us to spend our time making content for my grandmother, end quote. And therein lies the problem, you shit nugget. The point I'm trying to make is that Biden's campaign needs everyone supporting him to make memetic content for his campaign, not CNN and MSNBC doing puff pieces and apologizing for his latest fuck-ups. He needs supporters to do his campaign's work for him. Quote, can they reach those audiences without the candidate actually appearing on the platforms those audiences increasingly use? End quote. No. No, they cannot. They straight up fled from TikTok, as they themselves admitted in this article. Quote, more importantly, can the campaign and the candidate talk about the issues that matter to young people and minorities in ways that don't feel distant or patronizing, end quote. You're running an old geezer who has brain damage. Literally. Biden has brain damage. He's had 2 aneurysms. Aneurysms plural. Quote, it's why instead of going on TikTok, Biden sat down with soccer star Megan Rapinoe on her Instagram live feed, a choice, Flaherty said, that was made in part to reach young women voters, end quote. Celebrities are high-level, top-down memetic vectors. They are not effective, especially when they just lost a court case because the judge called them on their shit, noting they were offered the contract that in hindsight would have made them more money, but demanded the one that ended up making them less money, and they can't call for a redo. Quote, it's why Biden won't likely be a guest anytime soon on Chapo Trap House. Probably not, said Flaherty, but we'll try and reach progressives through live-streamed conversations with Senator Elizabeth Warren, end quote. I.e., instead of going on Reddit, he's talking to Warren. Let me reiterate this. Biden is so fucking unrelatable and unpopular, he's avoiding the liberal, far-left paradise of Reddit and one of its furthest left communities and going to talk to another top-down memetic vector, Warren, who failed at memetics the hardest. Quote, Next Gen ought to be doing that, said Flaherty. It's super smart. But if Joe Biden hosted a Twitch drag show, that would be weird. But if Joe Biden had a real serious policy conversation with a streamer about issues in the gaming community, like, that's just less weird. End quote. It'll be less weird until Biden starts talking about children rubbing his hairy legs by the pool again, that is. I can't believe I typed that. It's literally true. Biden talked about this at a filmed campaign event. What the actual fuck? He has brain damage, people. The end.